This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And welcome to the latest, the freshest edition of Tiger Talk with Chirco and Company. I am your host, Vito Chirco, alongside my usual sidekick and broadcast partner in fun. That is Doc from Doc and Jack, John Charles McElroon. John, how are you doing?
Vito, a lot of news this week in the world of baseball. I think a lot of people are talking about the Hall of Fame, the winter meetings, some news and notes regarding acquisitions for the Tigers. So I'm looking forward to this broadcast, another fine edition of the Tigers Talk podcast. I want to thank the sponsors that make this broadcast possible, the Detroit Sports Commission and the Legacy Football Organization. What's up with you, sir?
Well, I'm doing well. I mean, I'm enjoying the winter meetings as much as possible. The Tigers making maybe a lackluster move or two. But I think of the two moves that they have made, two pitchers that they've added, one has been meaningful in Tyson Ross, a right-hander who pitched for the Cardinals last season, has pitched for the Padres, has pitched for the Rangers. Now, in 2017, he was still going through trials and tribulations, recovering from this right shoulder inflammation. He started for the Padres on opening day in 2016, and then missed the remainder of that campaign because of right shoulder inflammation. Underwent a procedure, went through all of that, all the rehab, the recovery, struggled through a middling, and really went through a middling 2017 campaign in which he struggled heavily. He posted a 7.71 earned run average with the Rangers in 12 games, including in 10 starts. But when you look back to the pre-right shoulder inflammation Tyson Ross period of time, you look at the 2013 through 2015 seasons for Tyson Ross when he was a Padre and a guy that was an all-star caliber arm that could strike out 200 batters in a season. And during that stretch of time, the 3-year period from 2013 through 2015 with the Padres, he posted a 3.07 ERA, a 3.13 fielding independent pitching mark, meaning that when you evaluate Ross for those 3 years, he was mighty, effective, and successful, almost matching his earned run average, meaning his earned run average really told the full story of Tyson Ross and how effective he was during that 3-year period in a Padres uni. And then he struck out 526 batters in 516 and two-thirds innings over those 3 years, averaging 200 strikeouts per 162 games over that 3-year stretch as well. Meaning to me, once again, that he was successful and very effective over that 3-year stretch with the Pods. It's just since then, he's battled with injury and hasn't done the best since, probably because he's been, trying to fully recover from all of those shoulder issues that he has suffered since 2016. And now his best baseball in recent memory was down the stretch from August on with the Cardinals, mostly in relief, as he pitched in 9 games with the Cards, including in 1 start. And during that time with the Cards, he recorded a 2.73 earned run average and a 3.65 fielding independent pitching mark. So once again, down the stretch in 2018 with the Cards, it was the best baseball that Ross had pitched since his years, 2013 through 2015 with the Pods, Doc. So this is a guy that definitely, if he emerges as a more healthy guy, a guy that can pitch for a full season in 2019, could be flipped by the Tigers going into that July 31 non-waiver trade deadline.
Exactly. They're taking a flyer on a guy that's relatively affordable, that had a decent stretch toward the second half of 2018, and so they brought him on. And so when you look at how people are reacting to it, not going to move the needle a whole heck of a lot. They are taking a flyer on a guy that potentially could be used as a flip, because when you look at the Tigers roster, when you look at what collectively they have and what they're going to put on the field, it's not going to be all that great. And so what you're trying to do is just bring on talent that is affordable, that can come in and potentially basically be flipped or come in and outperform their contract. That's what they're trying to do, is try to get guys cheap around the $5 to $6 million neighborhood and have them way outperform that contract by pitching a lot of innings and things like that. So great. It's not going to move the needle a whole heck of a lot for me, but hey, if he can come out and eat some innings up like you said, he can be productive. I do think right now the majority of the fans realize 2019 is going to be a wash. There's going to be just a handful of guys that we're going to be paying attention to, and we just, there's going to be really very few storylines outside of, certain players that people are going to pay attention to. And you look at, in transitioning to the winter meetings, I think one of the biggest stories that people are talking about is whether or not Nick Castellanos is going to be a guy that's going to be on the roster. And it's interesting to hear about the teams that are interested in their teams from the National League, the Braves and the Dodgers. What did you make of those rumors that were swirling? And should the Tigers actively listen to some offers, or should they continue to see what he can produce and maybe drive up the price around the trade deadline? Because it just seems like when the Tigers are making moves, it's usually more around the deadline than it is in the winter meetings. But if you're getting some interest, you're gauging what Nick Castellanos is worth, I definitely would have no problem if he wasn't on the team, especially when you think right now the philosophy should be acquire as many young talent that you can put in the minors, acquire as much talent that you can get cheap that could come up in 2021, 2022 when you're starting to turn things around. Because the next 2 or 3 seasons, competitiveness is not the name of the game. So if Nick Castellanos is valued as an asset by a couple of organizations, I'd have no problem if they actually listened and pulled the trigger on letting him go.
Well, Castellanos is still under 32, so you can probably get a large coup of prospects. Now, the thing is, they're not all going to be top-tier prospects, and you're not going to get the likes of Alex Verdugo from the Dodgers. They're top prospect in their farm system currently, or other teams' top prospects, or top prospect overall in their respective farm system. You're not going to get that, so you can't expect that in a coup and just a return for Nick Castellanos. And also because of the fact of a factor that we talked about before with Nick Castellanos and his overall game. His lackluster D in the corner outfield, in the past at third base. Can he even play first base at an effective mark? So the thing is, as a defender, he doesn't get it done at an effective level. So that limits and diminishes his trade value. Thus, you're not going to get a great package of, top tier guys in return for Nick Castellanos. But at least going for him is his great 2018 season in which he was the best Tiger hitter, but also the best Tiger overall. And the fact that he did have a good season and has showcased the ability last year specifically, not only to hit for power, but to hit for average, to get on base. And all of that means something to these teams looking for corner outfielders to upgrade their ball clubs.
Where would he be a better fit? Atlanta or the Dodgers?
Well, I think Atlanta is more likely, perhaps, because the Dodgers might trade for Corey Kluber and give up their top arms and prospects for Kluber instead of giving them up for Nick Castellanos, which makes a lot of sense to me because I'd rather have Corey Kluber atop my rotation than Nick Castellanos hitting in the middle of my order. So I would say the Braves, subsequently, who have some decent prospects, too, that you can land in a deal for Nick Castellanos.
So I asked you the question, 2019, opening day, Nick C.
I think it's less and less likely. So I'm going to say it's below 50%. I think I've said that in a recent podcast or two, maybe even last week. And I think it really is. As we play a game of Big Vito's over-under, and if you put the odds at 50.5%, they are under 50.5. They have to be. I mean, what do you think?
Sayonara, Nick C.
Almost you can say that fully. So we just have to be happy then, if that's the case where he's dealt, we have to be happy about Tyson Ross. Guys like that they acquire, who, by the way, reverting back to our conversation about Tyson Ross, he'll be 32 come April 22nd of next year. So on the wrong side of 30, really not in his prime anymore, but only making $5.75 million for next season, signed to a 1-year $5.75 million deal with the Tigers. So really, for Tyson Ross, it's a reclamation year, a year in which he can regain some trade value, and then the Tigers once again can flip him if he has a positive first half. But also with that acquisition by Alavila and company, the Tigers front office, during this year's winter meetings, I think it's the most exciting winter meetings or just off-season acquisition the Tigers have made, counting last off-season and this off-season. Remember, the Tigers only got Leonis Martin and Mike Fiers. I'm more excited about Tyson Ross than last year's acquisitions of Mike Fiers and Leonis Martin.
Okay, so you think the addition of Moore and Tyson Ross help upgrade the pitching staff a little bit more than some of the acquisitions made in the past, and you're happy with those moves because you're obviously seeing what Alavila is trying to do. Trying to get guys on one-year deals cheap, seeing about the potential. But remember, similar to what they did with Fires, they also had a bust in trying to do that with Liriano.
Sure,
and so
who I didn't mention. Yes, you are right to bring that up.
Because I remember a tweet that I put out, and I said, oh my God, they went out and got another journeyman in Liriano. I remember seeing him getting shelled year after year with the Astros and then with teams prior, with the Pirates and things like that. I just saw a guy that kind of was on his last legs, and they took a chance on him. And I said, really? You paid him that much money? And people were like, oh, they're going to flip him. They're going to flip him. But guess what? Yes, it's great to play fantasy GM, but guess what happens when the season starts? You got to throw Tyson Ross out there on the mound, and if he puts up film that's garbage, if he gives up a bunch of home runs, has a high whip, has a high ERA, you ain't going to get crap for him, and you're stuck with him, and you got to kind of similar to what you're doing with Jordan Zimmerman, you just got to kind of utilize him in different situations, and that's what sucks about taking flyers, is that everybody hopes that, yeah, let's flip him, let's get something for him, but also you also have to hope that the pitcher stays healthy, that he produces, because you don't want to see a bunch of guys that give up a bunch of runs and just struggle. You know how awkward that is and how uncomfortable that is when you got talent that really sucks and everybody knows they suck, but you're trying to showcase them. And the best part is the manager and the organization are like, oh, we still find value and we think they're great. And they try to do the positive PR to try to drive up the value of the player. And then they go out there and it's like, oh, God, remember like Kyle Farnsworth and some of the other garbage pitchers that we've had that they've just tried to try it out there, like a Blaine Hardy and things like that. They're there, they're good, but, you know, at times they do blow up a little bit, like Alex Wilson and things like that, just up and down. So we got to keep our fingers crossed. A guy like Tyson Ross, you have to hope that he comes out there and is dominant early on so you can drive up the trade price if need be. And so that's what you got to hope for, but I would say, you know, keep your hopes really low in terms of that happening, actually.
Well, there's no guarantee he can even stay healthy at this point in his career. Once again, he's on the wrong side of 30, going to be 32 come April 22nd of next year. And then you have to also bring into the equation that last year he was much more effective as a reliever. You're not going to get as much for him in return if he's just a reliever. So you got to factor that into the equation as well, that really at this stage in Tyson Ross's career, more than likely past the point of being an all-star caliber starting arm. Maybe as a reliever, effective in the middle innings, maybe as a late inning arm, perhaps, because he has had strikeout stuff in the past. Remember, has had that 200 strikeout stuff in the past as well when he was a member of the Padres, and he struck out 212 batters with the Padres in 2015. So this is a guy that has had the stuff and the makeup to be strikeout artist in the past. The thing is, can he do that in 2019 with the Tigers? Probably not going to be as dominant / as effective of a strikeout artist for the Tigers in this upcoming season. So you got to also weigh that when you look at the variables regarding Tyson Ross and whether or not you can deal him for something of impact that can help out the Tigers in the long-term future. So once again, it goes back to a lot of what you said, Doc. First and foremost, the Tigers want to maintain health with him, want to make sure he can stay healthy. And then, can he be effective as an every fifth-day starting arm in the Tigers rotation, at least for the first half of the season, and enough to, warrant the Tigers flipping him and for something of quality in return? There are some big question marks there with Tyson Ross, even though I am excited about his acquisition.
Other news made. Do you care about some of the Rule 5 draftees that maybe have been let go from the Tigers or that get picked up by other organizations? Recap what that means and who was let go from the Tigers and who's no longer part of the roster.
Mike Gerber being let go. That's been talked about a lot. Now, we haven't actually dove into it yet. So we did reflect on Alex Wilson being gone. You have James McCann being gone. Mike Gerber, who is under 30, just being let go and being claimed off of waivers by the San Francisco Giants. Now, this is a guy that was a middling bat, though, in AAA last year, didn't hit for average, hit 2-something in the low 2s this past season, and really is a 4A guy. He's not good enough to cut it at the major league level. Thus, the Tigers just allowed him to leave their 40-man roster and to be claimed by the San Francisco Giants without getting anything in return for Mike Gerber, who realistically you probably weren't going to get a lot or anything really in return for him anyways. But it's a little bit disappointing, and from Tigers fans and pundits alike on Twitter that are reacting to it and have been reacting to it this week, Doc, because he is on the right side of 30, being under 30, and I believe only 27. Thus, he might have a little bit of an upside to become a better hitter and become a major league outfielder one day. I just don't think he has what it takes to cut it at the major league level, and maybe even as a fourth outfielder. So the Giants are still taking a gamble with him. It's just they're getting him for free. And it reduces the Tigers' 40-man roster to 37 guys. Remember that, so 3 more roster spots are to be filled by the Tigers this offseason to give them 40 men on their 40-man roster.
So in terms of how, the loss of a Gerber affects you, very low.
Very little impact for me.
You don't see him coming back to bite the Tigers in the butt and being successful with the Giants all that much. What are the chances of him actually going on to the Giants and actually making the Tigers eat the crow for letting him go?
I'll place the odds at 25.5 for a game of Big Vito's over-under. And I would say under 25.5% the likelihood of Mike Gerber making an impact with the Giants or somebody else in the future at the major league level.
All right, after the break, what do we have upcoming? Good stuff, too. Some interesting national news and notes regarding who got into the Hall of Fame and ESPN making some changes to Sunday Night Baseball and other topics as well. Is that what's coming up in the second half of the podcast?
Well, you didn't mention one big thing. How about Harold Baines and Lee Smith getting into the Hall of Fame via the Today's Game Era committee? So we'll have to dive into that. Was Harold Baines worthy of inclusion into the Baseball Hall of Fame? Was Lee Smith, the former all-time saves leader, worthy of inclusion into the Hall of Fame? All of that will be discussed and more in the second half of this week's episode of Tigers Talk. And Doc, as you know, one of our finest partners at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network, and our newest sponsor is the Legacy Football Organization, which was founded in 2009. And it is the premier and the very best off-season development program in the state of Michigan, in the Midwest, and in the entire U.S. of A. It provides unique platforms for student athletes on and off the football field through community service, social awareness, education, and football. And it features a staff of many former collegiate stars and NFL players, including legendary Lions wide receiver Herman Moore and a past guest of our Too Bad Hombres podcast, and former 3-time All-American linebacker at Michigan State and a Super Bowl champion with the New York Football Giants in 2011, Greg Jones. And to find out more about Legacy Football and all of the events they are putting on before the end of this year and in the new year, please contact National Director of Football Ops, Justin Cesante, or go to the organization's terrific website online at www.legacyfootballorg.com. And now to our other fine partner at the DSP Network and a sponsor of Tigers Talk in the Detroit Sports Commission. And we love Chris Smith, the director of the Detroit Sports Commission, and Marty Dobeck, the man behind the scenes responsible for all the PR and marketing for the Detroit Sports Commission, which has a responsibility of bringing to the Metro Detroit area fine and marquee events on both the national and international level. And to find out, guys, about all of the events that the Detroit Sports Commission is bringing to our very region, once again, that is the Metro Detroit area, please follow the Detroit Sports Commission on Twitter and on Instagram at DET Sports. And make sure to check out the Detroit Sports Commission's terrific website at detroitsports.org. Hey, Doc, back here on Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. I'm your host, Vito Hieronimo Chirco, and that is Doc across from me at the table in the Detroit Sports Podcast Network studios in lovely Sterling Heights. And now, Doc, here's a topic I want to get into, and it's a topic that brings up to me the fact that now you probably can stay up and watch all of Sunday Night Baseball in the 2019 campaign, because the start time for Sunday Night Baseball is being moved up from 8 p.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Meaning, Doc, that you can stay up and watch the entirety of Sunday Night Baseball in the 2019 season.
Well, Vito, I'll tell you this. How many games did I watch of Sunday Night Baseball in 2018?
Probably one or under one.
Zero.
There we go.
So
Thought it might have been that.
I was excited at first when I heard, time change. I thought it was Sunday Night Football. And
Okay.
I told my wife, I'm like,
Got you going,
it's
but
starting
Sunday
7.
Night Baseball, not SNF, SMB.
Well, Vito, all I know about Sunday Night Baseball, and I might be wrong, isn't that one of the 3-man booth with Jessica Mendoza on it?
Mendoza.
That's
who
all
just
I
got
read.
re-signed by ESPN.
That's all I know about that, and I don't pay attention too much to it because I did want to talk to you after some news in that the state of baseball, I do think, has to kind of change a little bit. In terms of changes, I was happy to hear that they're talking about limiting the shifts, talking about more offense in these meetings. I think Rob Manfred has a serious issue at hand in that a lot of teams, their offense was basically boom or bust. And it's not really conducive to entertaining baseball to have, teams basically just, strike out a lot or hit home runs. You got to have a little bit more contact. You got to basically allow for a little bit more offense. And other leagues have done it as well. You see that, the NFL has basically made the rules a little bit better for quarterbacks and receivers so that you can have more offense. Baseball last year, I felt like with the sheer number of strikeouts, with the number of, basically seeing, Victor Martinez get so frustrated every single at-bat trying to beat the shift, I do think that you should limit the number of shifts. Or basically, I would be in favor of them just eliminating it completely from the game, in that you got to have everybody field their position, no shifts allowed, let the game take place, and kind of go away from this emphasis on defense, because the game became overanalyzed and basically boring. A lot of times you had teams basically struggling, and this all-or-nothing mentality didn't make the game great. So I'm definitely in favor of even earlier times for games. I know the Tigers had some games that started at 6 and things like that, so that's fine.
On Saturdays, too.
But you got to continue to shorten the game to around 2.5 hours max, and you got to beat the shift. You got to kill that from baseball, and I do think that, some changes that have to be made will make the game better. They have to, because viewership's down a little bit, and when you looked at some of the ratings, I was surprised, quite frankly, that the Boston Dodgers series rated that low. I was shocked.
It was a bad look for Major League Baseball.
It was, right? And how surprised were you at that? And I do think that some changes have to take place. Are you in favor of what I said regarding the shift and some changes, or am I just a curmudgeon and not with the times?
By the way, A-Rod's also on the Sunday Night Baseball crew, and so is Matt Vasgersian. A-Rod, as I like to call him. Come on, you're missing out. No love for A-Rod and Matt Vasgersian. Anyways, I'm going to show more love to the shift than you are. It doesn't irk me nearly as much. And because it's about strategy. It's strategic why these teams implement the shift on certain batters. The only problem I have with it is that I think some Major League Baseball clubs are overutilizing the defensive shift on batters in a game-to-game basis. I don't like that aspect of it, because I think some batters don't warrant the intention, don't warrant the shifting to adjust for what the hitter does best, and more often than not, in terms of where he hits it. I think some batters don't warrant that attention and that kind of, focus on shifting over to adjust for where they hit it the most on the baseball diamond. So I don't like it for every single batter, and I think it is over-implemented and overutilized at times. That's where I am irked a little bit and find some fault with the shift. But overall-wise, I think it's all strategic, and there is room for strategy in all 4 major professional sports leagues, right? And all sports in general, at every single level that you speak of. So why can't there be this shifting? Thus, some strategy in Major League Baseball where defenses can adjust for these big impact batters and then get in position for where these batters hit the baseball more often than not. And that's why it doesn't irk me nearly as much as somebody like you, who I don't think is as much of a real baseball fan, perhaps, as I am, which is probably true, and you can admit that much. Right, Doc?
I watch good baseball. I obviously
good, but not all baseball. And some of it is too long for you. And you think, now, is this defensive shifting you think will causing the overall quality of games to diminish and for the games to be elongated consistently too?
Exactly. I think that the shift basically allows for more outs. And when you have more outs, there's nobody on base and not enough offense, and then you're getting games that are not interesting. And so
you're an offense guy. You'd rather see that than a one-run game, a 2-1, 3-2 ball game.
Singles, hits, yeah. Right now, too many teams are like all or nothing. And, with this trajectory and things like that, hitters are basically going with the notion of, hey, I'll make a boatload of money by hitting home runs, so I'm going to, really care about launch angle and swing at as hard as possible.
And at everything, and K a lot, too.
Yeah, exactly.
Ks are way up, yeah.
Exactly. It doesn't make for great baseball to have it that way, and I do think that baseball does have to kind of address the competitiveness of the league, too. There's already like 20 teams, in 2019 that have no chance of winning. And so that
not as much parity as there used to be, and maybe that's a factor as well in why there isn't as much parity on a large, scale throughout Major League Baseball.
And so the pay scale's got to be addressed. The time of the game's got to be addressed. Look, 7:00 is great for Sunday night baseball. Good for them to kind of pay attention to the timing of when the games are going to start. And I do think that more kids being into the game is definitely important. You got to engage the fans. And right now, I just think that baseball struggles with the notion that it's boring and that it's not going to keep kids' attention. A lot of kids are going towards esports and video games and going away from baseball. And if you don't have a young, passionate fan base, you're going to have a hard time with growth. And it'll be interesting to look at some attendance. Now, you made some news in that.
I did kind of via Twitter, didn't I?
Yes, you addressed something that people are really passionate about and frustrated with, in that you have the Baseball Hall of Fame, and there are some controversial omissions definitely here in town. People are, kind of hoping that Lou Whitaker will get into the Hall of Fame. They just saw Alan Trammell and Jack Morris get in, and after a long time, people, felt like it's really past due. A lot of years went by when those guys really should have went in. And then, the announcement was made earlier this week in regards to who entered this year's class, and Harold Baines' name came up, and I was like, was he even on the list? And I said, well, okay. Now, I didn't then start formulating in my mind that it diminished the Hall of Fame, that he wasn't worthy, that why. I was like, Harold Baines, I'm like, I knew he was productive, but I didn't think he had a Hall of Fame career. And I'm always of the mindset that if you go, if you got to question it, that the player shouldn't be in it. But it was controversial. A lot of people are talking about it. And you made a comparison that, whoa, if a guy like Harold Baines is in the Hall of Fame, Lou Whitaker, when you look at it, his WAR was more than the combined WAR of the two guys that got in this year. And you made a reference, and you tagged Baseball Reference, and they acknowledged it, and your tweet did some numbers there. Good job, sir.
Lou Whitaker, career WAR according to BaseballReference.com. I did tag Baseball Reference on Twitter. Thanks to them for allowing my beautiful tweet to, really live in glory and get more retweets and more favorites, you name it. So,
yes, sir.
But my tweet was about Lou Whitaker. His career WAR 75.1 according to BaseballReference.com. The combined career WAR of Harold Baines and Lee Smith, the two inclusions to the Baseball Hall of Fame via the Today's Game Era Committee, combined WAR of 67.7 WAR. So Whitaker's greater than those two guys combined.
So most people do believe Whitaker at some point will get in. What do you make of the selection of Lee Smith and Harold Baines?
Lee Smith, by the way, was once the all-time saves leader in Major League Baseball.
So no problem with that.
I'm fine with that. Harold Baines irks me, man. Come on. Mike Trout, did you know this stat? How about this? And you might know what I'm about to say, but Mike Trout has a better WAR already career-wise than Harold Baines ever did in all his years of playing in Major League Baseball. How about that?
What's the reasoning? Why'd he get in?
You tell me, Doc. Nobody knows. Everybody's still scratching their heads. Either guys that know the game, historians, they don't know. They're scratching their heads. Nobody knows the reason. People that know the career, all about the career of Harold Baines, don't know why the hell he made it into the Hall of Fame. He never received more than 6.1% of the vote from the writers.
It's weird, right? Because
really,
I was
really
make
weird,
some
man.
jokes.
That's just weird, really weird, and really a travesty too.
A travesty?
I think so. You should describe it as a travesty. Yeah, it is.
I think if you're Harold Baines, how do you react if you're that?
Right?
Everyone's
Because
like,
everybody hates that you're in, man. How bad does he feel? And he was surprised. He said it himself. He's like, I'm in the Hall of Fame? He's like, right, laughing. He probably knows deep down, I shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. I just fooled all you guys. I just duped all of you guys to vote me into the Hall of Fame. And by the way, it was a 16-man committee. He needed 12 votes at least. He got the necessary 12 votes to get in. And by the way, his former White Sox owner and Jerry Reinsdorf, his former White Sox manager Antonio La Russa, and his former GM with the Orioles, who he played for at the very end of his major league career, were on that 16-man Today's Game Era committee. So there was some bias on that committee to select Harold Baines for Hall of Fame induction later on next year. So definitely some bias kicked in and allowed him to now eventually get enshrined in Cooperstown next summer. Because once again, Reinsdorf, the owner of the White Sox, and still is, for my knowledge, yes, he is, the owner of the White Sox, and Baines played for the White Sox. Baines played for Tony La Russa when La Russa was a skipper of the White Sox. He played for Pat Gillick, the GM of the Orioles, when Baines was an Oriole. So a lot of reasons for why Baines got in there through some guys that definitely favored him because, they knew him really well and were members of the same organization at the same time as Harold Baines. Doesn't look good for Major League Baseball when that's the case as well.
What were the points that you think were highlighting his induction? Like what, recap for those that don't know, recap Harold Baines' career. He was a productive player, but not probably Hall of Fame worthy. But
no.
What did Harold Baines bring to the table?
Well, see, the thing is, there's no key defining moment from his career. No defining moment that really sticks out. And from him in the playoffs, like a big hit, or him winning MVP, or being runner-up, or winning World Series MVP. There's nothing like that on the mantle, on the resume for Harold Baines as a major leaguer throughout all his years. And he had an all-star caliber career. I think was a 5-time all-star. But he only won one Silver Slugger award, too. Was never the best at his position. I think was barely in the top 10 in right field. And he played right field only for the start of his career, then became a DH, by the way. He played more time throughout his career as a DH. From 87 to 01, he was just a designated hitter on a regular basis. So, and that means from age 28 on, as I looked this up, he was 28 years old when he started being the DH on a regular basis for himself, meaning he didn't really even play in the field for the majority of his career and the majority of his prime years as a major leaguer. And that's not a good look when he was, more often than not, a DH. And there's guys that were DHs for as long as Harold Baines and aren't in the Hall of Fame, that were better DHs, better hitters that deserve inclusion in the Hall of Fame a lot more than Harold Baines, such as Edgar Martinez, who played third base but played a lot of his career from age 32 on as a designated hitter with the Seattle Mariners, whose career WAR is better and a lot better than Harold Baines's. Edgar Martinez's career WAR stands at 68.4, according to Baseball Reference. Harold Baines's career WAR, according to Baseball Reference, only 38.7. Edgar Martinez blows him out of the water. His WAR is almost double that of Harold Baines and almost the same amount of years at DH. So a much better DH is left out of the Hall of Fame. And Baines is in? I mean, that's why you got to start scratching your head and start asking this today's Game Era Committee, how did you allow Harold Baines to be voted in? I mean, George Steinbrenner, the former owner, now deceased owner of the New York Yankees, won all those World Series titles with the Yanks. I thought he should have made it in via this today's Game Era ballot. He was left off. I mean, he was on the ballot, but didn't get in. He's the one guy that I thought would get in of all these guys. And then Lee Smith does deserve some consideration because he was the all-time saves leader at one point. But, man, you look at Baines' career WAR once again, it's tied with the likes of Maglio Ordonez and Juan Gonzalez, two former Tiger outfielders, have the same amount of career WAR all time as Harold Baines, according to BaseballReference.com. Harold Baines has less WAR than all of these following names, than Rafael Furcal, Moises Alou, Tim Salmon, a guy that I've never even heard of, Carney Lansford, David Justice, Placido Polanco has better WAR all time than Harold Baines, who's going to be in the Hall of Fame now. Other guys such as Steve Finley, Mike Cameron, the father of Daz Cameron, Brett Butler, Jason Giambi, Brian Giles, Luis Gonzalez, Robin Ventura, Will Clark, John Olerud. A lot of guys that weren't great major leaguers or barely even all-stars that were kind of one-dimensional, maybe weren't the best fielders but could hit, or were good fielders but couldn't hit. So a lot of one-dimensional guys that were barely all-star caliber have better career Baseball Reference WARs than Harold Baines as well, from that list that I just named off, including Placido Polanco. Good second baseman. He made a couple of all-star games, and that was it. He has a better career WAR than Harold Baines. So a lot of reasons why it's a head-scratcher, Harold Baines making it into the Hall of Fame via this Today's Game Era Committee.
Thumbs down. Hall of Shame.
Not just a thumb down, two thumbs down. He should be in a different section of the Hall of Fame based on, his accolades compared to other guys' accolades. And then Lou Whitaker is still not in with double the WAR of, when you add up, once again, Baines and Smith, the two guys being included via this Today's Game Era Committee. And Whitaker's career WAR is better than those guys, Smith and Baines combined. And Whitaker now, by the way, guys, let me mention this too, has a chance of making it in next year when the Modern Baseball Era Committee meets again. So he could be named a guy that gets in next year when that Modern Baseball Era Committee meets during the winter meetings.
Man, sometimes you just got to, scratch your head and go, well, they looked at it. They decided he deserved to be in. Many people are not in favor of it. And it's just, I think, a selection when many people are in disagreement, probably not the best selection. And that's the way it goes.
Ultimately not the best selection. Now you can bring up guys like Dale Murphy. My dad was bringing up Dave Parker, former outfielder for the Pittsburgh Pirates. All these guys have better career WARs than nobody ever thought of being Hall of Famers. Now they're Hall of Fame caliber because this guy was allowed to get in. He just should not have been allowed in. An all-star caliber hitter throughout his career, had the longevity, was an all-star with the Orioles at age 40. But once again, all these years as a DH, not a multidimensional guy, and never a guy, he never finished runner-up for MVP or in the top 5 for MVP. Victor Martinez at least was runner-up for MVP in 2014. Maybe V-Mart should be in the Hall of Fame now. He was primarily a DH throughout his career too. I mean, now he merits consideration now and deserves some consideration because of Baines getting in.
One final note, those athletes that go overseas when the baseball season's over, just be careful. Each and every offseason, it's tough to hear when a couple young athletes, promising players or role players that are on these clubs, they go down to their hometown and they end up getting in these car wrecks and dying. It's kind of becoming a pattern, one too familiar. Obviously, you heard the news of the passing of Castillo and Valbuena, and it's unfortunate that they're no longer going to be part of their clubs, and you just got to be careful because these roads are tough, and you got to realize, too, that you got a lot to play for, and maybe, you know what, at some point in time, you recognize that it's better to stay in the States and get your training done and maybe bring your family up if possible. It's unfortunate news.
It is really. And you know what? A lot of those areas, unfortunately, too, right now in this modern day and age are unsafe. Unsafe to be in, just to reside in. Not only to play in, to practice in, and to train in, but just to reside in. And with that being said, I want to bring up one other quick note regarding Harold Baines. He is now the third #1 overall draft pick in Major League Baseball history to be selected to the National Baseball Hall of Fame. The other two guys are Chipper Jones, who was the #1 overall pick in 1990, and Ken Griffey Jr. in 1987. Baines was drafted #1 overall in 1977. Kind of weird when you mention Baines in the same conversation now as Chipper Jones and Ken Griffey Jr., two other former #1 overall draft picks that deserve a lot more merit and have a lot more reason for being in the Hall of Fame as they are right now.
Breaking news. Maybe an opportunity for the Tigers to upgrade. Toronto Blue Jays have just announced, as we were recording, roster move. They've released shortstop Troy Tulowitzki, making him an outright free agent. Tigers, thumbs up, thumbs down. Should they pursue a guy like that? Is he way outside the budget? Could he be the piece that's missing for the Detroit Tigers at the shortstop position? Because I heard the news of maybe bringing back Ian Kinsler.
Saw that article from Anthony
Thumbs
Fennick. Yeah,
no, I'm not down for that.
No, just play Nico Grum at second base.
Yeah,
he's younger. Kinsler towards the end of his career.
Yeah, now at shortstop, Troy Tulowitzki. Is that a name you'd like?
They need a shortstop. There's not a lot of better options, but the thing is, there's healthier options, more effective options, and guys that stay healthy more often than Troy Tulowitzki at this point in Tulowitzki's career.
Is it worth a tweet to ask Detroit Podcast Nation about?
I think let's crowdsource it.
Okay.
Poll the nation. Poll the Detroit Podcast Twitter Nation out there and see what they have to say about Troy Tulowitzki becoming a member of the Tigers maybe in 2019.
What do you think they'll say? Yes or no?
I hope no. I think yes. Because people see he can rest on his merits, his success from in the past with the Jays, with the Rockies, when he was an all-star caliber slugger at shortstop. And a guy that could field, too. He's no longer that. He's pretty much washed up at this stage, and because of his injury past and recent injury past, he can't stay healthy at this stage in his career. So I'm all right if the Tigers take a flyer on him on a one-year deal, which is what it would be, more than likely. Tulowitzki, I don't think we'll get more than that on the open market currently. So if they give him a one-year deal for $5.75 million like they just gave Tyson Ross, I'd be fine with it. But realistically, get a younger option at shortstop that can stay healthier over the course of a full season.
All right, Vito, great podcast recording. Programming note, I think we're going to record one more podcast for the year. Then we'll take maybe some time off for the holiday, come back strong in 2019. But definitely enjoyed the baseball chat with you. Follow Vito on Twitter at Vito Jerome. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. If there's anything that we've said that you agree with or disagree with, feel free, message anytime. If you're so inclined, leave us a voicemail, 248-579-8686. Great podcast, sir.
If you like Harold Baines more than me and really have a valid argument for why he should be in the Hall of Fame, hit me up, please, at Vito Jerome on Twitter. Adios.